Hello, everyone. I'm 27, and I fell in love with a dirty, AIDS-ridden homeless woman from the street. I know, it sounds crazy. Even I thought I was losing my mind at first. But let me start from the beginning. It happened in New York. I was on the subway, as usual, early in the morning, trying to make it to my shift at the airport cafe. I worked as a waiter, not exactly a dream job, but it helped me pay for my marketing studies. As always, the train was half empty. Sleepy passengers, students with books, office workers glued to their phones. And then she walked in. A woman around 35, wearing a torn hoodie and jeans that had long since turned to rags. Her hair was dirty and matted, her face smudged with the city's grime. She shuffled forward, holding a plastic cup in one hand and what looked like an old stuffed toy in the other. She was asking for a few cents, for coffee, or for a ticket. But everyone knew where the money would really go. I never gave money to people like that, but something about her caught my attention. Maybe it was her voice, quiet and raspy, but without the aggressive demand I had heard from other beggars. Maybe it was her eyes, sky blue, bright like a spring morning, in stark contrast to the rest of her appearance. Maybe it was the way she spoke, not mechanically, but with some kind of honesty. She came up to me and asked for change. I reached into my pocket, pulled out $1 and handed it to her. She looked at me with surprise and muttered that I was generous, then turned to walk away. But then, for some reason, I asked if she was hungry. She froze, her lips trembled, and she whispered that she was always hungry. I don't know what got into me, but 15 minutes later, we were sitting in a small cafe near my apartment, and I was ordering her an omelet and coffee. She ate like she hadn't seen food in days. Maybe she really hadn't. I asked her name. She looked up at me and said that she used to be Mary, but wasn't sure who she was anymore. Then you'll be Mary again, I told her. And she smiled. I don't know when exactly I realized I didn't want to let her go. Maybe when I saw the gratitude in her eyes as she ate. Maybe when I noticed her hands shaking. Not from caffeine, but from withdrawal. Maybe when I understood that beneath all the filth and scars, there was something more than just another addict. I told her to come with me. She laughed, asking if I even knew what I was doing. Just come, I said. She studied me for a long moment, then shrugged and agreed. I washed her in my bathroom. It was a long process. At first, she was shy, then she laughed, then she almost cried. But when she finally stepped out, dressed in my old sweatpants and hoodie, her hair clean and damp, I saw her for who she really was. She was beautiful. Not the polished beauty of models, but real, with a slightly high forehead, a straight nose, and delicate lips. We talked all night. She told me how she ran away from home at 17, how she fell in with the wrong crowd, how she first tried heroin, how she later tried to quit, how she ended up living on the streets. I listened, and then I asked her to stay. She was silent. Not because I wanted to save you, I said. Just stay. She nodded. It wasn't easy. She went through withdrawals. She cried at night. I had to hide money so she wouldn't buy drugs. I took her to a doctor, bought her clothes. But most importantly, I gave her something she had never had before. The feeling that she mattered to someone. I started teaching her. I bought her a dictionary because she had forgotten how to spell certain words. I showed her how to use a phone. I taught her table manners. Sometimes she got frustrated and accused me of trying to turn her into someone else. I told her I was just helping her remember who she really was. A year passed, then 2. She got a job as a cleaner. Then she took some courses. Then she earned her GED. Then she enrolled in college. And I realized that I loved her. I proposed to her. She cried and asked if I was sure. I told her I was. 10 years passed. Mary was no longer the woman I had met on the subway. She was a teacher in an elementary school. The children adored her. She always smiled. Sometimes we would walk through New York, and she would look at the homeless people, the ones who were just like she had been. She would say she could have stayed there. But you didn't, I would remind her. She would take my hand and say that it was because I believed in her. I would smile and tell her no, it was because she believed in herself. And we would walk on. Another 5 years passed. We lived in a small but cozy house in Queens. She worked as a teacher. I had become a marketing specialist at a large company. We had both grown. Together. But the past doesn't just disappear. One evening, when I came home from work, the house was too quiet. I checked the bedroom. Empty. The bathroom. Empty. And then I saw her. She was standing in the kitchen, holding a crumpled old coffee cup in her hands. I immediately knew what it was. I asked where she got it. She looked at me and said an old acquaintance had found her. I tensed. Who? She said his name was Tony. I remembered. Tony, the drug dealer from Manhattan. The man who once had control over her life like she was nothing more than a broken doll. I asked what he wanted. She looked at the cup and said he told her he remembered her, that he was happy for her, and that if she ever wanted to come back, she always could. Silence. I asked what she told him. She took a deep breath and said nothing. She just took the cup and left. I sat beside her, took her hand, and asked if she wanted to go back. She shook her head and whispered, "Of course not," but admitted how terrifying it was. The past still had a pull. I hugged her. "You're not alone," I said. She squeezed my hand. "I know," she answered. The next day, we went to the subway. She suggested it herself. We stepped into the train, and I saw them. People just like she had once been. Mary walked up to a girl, barely 20, thin, with hollow eyes. She greeted her and asked if she had a place to stay. The girl shook her head. Mary handed her a card. It was for a shelter. "They helped me," she said. "You can get out too." The girl stared at her, not believing. Mary squeezed her hand and told her she knew how scary it was, but if she wanted to, she could come. A year later, Mary opened her own center to help former addicts. She was no longer afraid of her past. She used it to save others. I watched her and knew I had never made a better decision in my life than the day I gave her $1 and offered her a meal. 2 years later, one evening, I found her on the porch wrapped in a blanket, looking at an old photo. It was her, years ago, young, with long blonde hair and eyes that had not yet seen so much pain. She said she wanted to leave New York, that this city had too many memories, too many shadows. She didn't want to run, she just wanted something new. A place without the past, where she could just be. She looked at me, waiting. I took her hand, kissed her palm, and told her I would go anywhere with her. A month later, we sold our house and moved to a small town by the coast. Our new home was nothing like New York, but it was exactly what it needed to be. Simple, bright, with a big garden where Mary planted roses. We woke up to the sound of waves, drank coffee on the porch, walked along the shore, holding hands like teenagers. One night, lying on the beach, looking at the stars, she admitted she never thought she would live to see this moment, that she used to be sure she would die in some dirty alley. But now she was here, with someone who believed in her, even when she couldn't. I pulled her close, stroked her hair, and told her I always knew she could make it. A year later, we had a daughter. A little miracle with her mother's eyes, her smile, her warmth. We named her Hope, because that's what we had found when we found each other. When I look at Mary now, at her glowing smile, her hands free of scars, her eyes free of fear, I know that I never made a better choice in my life than that day on the subway when I gave her $1 and asked if she was hungry.